23, the final chapter of The Giver. In chapter 22, Jonas is cycling along this long road, and he's very far from the community now. And he begins to see things he's never seen before as the road changes into a ugly and difficult road to ride a bike on. He sees deer, he sees birds, he sees flowers and trees he's never seen before. Eventually, though, he starts to realize that he doesn't have enough food, that he misses the things in the community, that they always had food, they always had a feeling of safety. But now he's getting hungry. He thinks about what he has sacrificed, which is knowing that things will happen and things will always be the sameness. But he's also doing this to protect Gabe and to give his community a life worth living with memories and colors and all these things. And as he lays down, he's starting to get starving. It feels like he's about to die, and he's starting not to care anymore about what happens to him. Chapter 23. Jonas felt more and more certain that the destination lay ahead of him, very near now in the night that was approaching. None of his senses confirmed it. He saw nothing ahead except the endless ribbon of roads unfolding and twisting narrow curves. He heard no sound ahead, but he's certain he's coming to where he needs to be. Yet he felt that elsewhere was not far away. But he had little hope left that he would be able to reach it. His hope went down, diminished further when the sharp, cold air began to blur and thicken with swirling white. So something white is coming out of the sky. Gabriel, wrapped in his inadequate blanket, was hunched, shivering and silent in his little seat. Jonas stopped the bike wearily, tired, lifted the child down, and realized with heartbreak how cold and weak Gabe had become. Standing in the freezing mound that was thickening around his numb feet, he can't feel his feet, Jonas opened his own tunic and held Gabriel to his bare chest and tied the torn and dirty blanket around them both. Gabriel moved feebly against him and whimpered briefly into the silence that surrounded them. So it's freezing cold, so Gabriel was now being held by Jonas against his chest to try and keep him warm. Dimly, from a nearly forgotten perception, as blurred as the substance itself, Jonas recalled what the whiteness was. "It's called snow, Gabe," Jonas whispered. "Snowflakes. They fall down from the sky and they're very beautiful." There was no response from the child, from the baby who had once been so curious and alert. Jonas looked down through the dust at the little head against his chest. Gabriel's curly hair was matted and dirty and filthy, and there were tear stains outlined in dirt on his pale cheeks. His eyes were closed. As Jonas watched, a snowflake drifted down from the sky and was caught briefly for a moment's sparkle in his tiny, fluttering eyelashes. Wearily, tired, he remounted the bicycle. A steep hill loomed ahead. In the best of conditions, the hill would have been difficult, demanding ride. But now the rapidly deepening snow obscured the narrow road and made the ride impossible. So he's riding up a very big hill. His front wheel moved forward imperceptibly as he pushed on the pedals with his numb, exhausted and tired legs. But the bicycle stopped. It would not move. He got off and let it fall and drop sideways into the snow. For a moment he thought how easy it would be to drop beside it himself, to let himself and Gabriel slide into the softness of snow, the darkness of night, the warm comfort of sleep. But he had come this far. He must try to go on. The memories had fallen behind him now, escaping from his protection to return to the people of his community. Were there any memories left at all? Could he hold on to one last bit of warmth? Did he still have the strength to give? Could Gabriel still receive? He pressed his hands into Gabriel's back and tried to remember sunshine. For a moment it seemed that nothing came to him, that his power was completely gone. Then it flickered suddenly as he felt tiny little tongues of heat begin to creep across and into his frozen feet and legs. He felt his face begin to glow and tense, cold skins of his arms and hands relax. For a fleeting second, he felt that he wanted to keep it for himself, to let himself bathe in sunlight, unburdened by anything or anyone else. So he's trying to remember a little bit of what it's like to be in the sun. But the moment passed and was followed by an urge, a need, a passionate yearning to share the warmth with the one person left for him to love. Tired, aching from the effort, he forced the memory of warmth into the thin, shivering body of Gabriel in his arms. Gabriel moved and stirred. For a moment they both were bathed in warmth and renewed strength as they stood hugging each other in the blinding snow. Jonas began to walk up the hill. The memory was agonizingly brief and short. He had trudged no more than a few yards through the night when it was gone, and then they were cold again. But his mind was awake and alert now. Warming himself ever so briefly had shaken away the lethargy, the tiredness and resignation, and restored and gave him his will to survive. He wants to keep fighting and surviving. He began to walk faster on feet that he could no longer feel, but the hill was treacherously steep, very difficult to walk up. He was stopped and impeded by the snow and his own lack of strength. He didn't make it very far until he stumbled and fell on the ground. On his knees, unable to get up to rise, Jonas tried a second time. His consciousness grasped, his thinking grasped at a wisp of another warm memory, and he tried desperately to hold it there, to make it bigger, enlarge it, and pass it into Gabriel. His spirits and strength lifted the memory, the momentary warmth, and he stood again. Again, Gabriel stirred against him as he began to climb the hill. But the memory faded, leaving him colder than before. If only he had had time to receive more warmth from the giver before he escaped. Maybe there would be more left for him now. But there was no point, no purpose in if-onlys. His entire concentration now had to be on moving his feet, warming Gabriel and himself, and going forward. He climbed, stopped, and warmed them both briefly again, with a tiny scrap of memory that seemed certainly to be all that he had left of these memories. The top of the hill seemed so far away, and he did not know what lay beyond him. But there was nothing left to do but continue. He trudged, he continued upward. As he approached the summit, the top of the hill at last, something began to happen. He was not warmer. If anything, he felt more numb and more cold. Numb is when you can't feel your fingers. He was not less exhausted. On the contrary, the opposite. His steps were leaden and he could barely move his freezing, tired legs. But he began suddenly to feel happy. He began to recall happy times. He remembered his parents and his sister. He remembered his friends, Asher and Fiona. He remembered the giver. Memories of joy and happiness flooded through him suddenly. He reached the place where the hill crested, where it was at the top, and he could feel the ground under his snow-covered feet become flat and level. It would not be uphill anymore. "We're almost there, Gabriel," he whispered, feeling quite certain, without knowing why. "I remember this place, Gabe." And it was true, but it was not a grasping of a thin and burdensome memory. This was different. This was something that he could keep. It was a memory of his own. He hugged Gabriel and rubbed him briskly, warming him to keep him alive. The wind was very bitterly cold. The snow swirled, blurring his vision, making it difficult to see. But somewhere ahead, through the blinding storm, he knew there was warmth and light. Using his final strength and a special knowledge that was deep inside him, his own memories, Jonas found the sled that was waiting for them at the top of the hill. Numbly, his hands fumbled for the rope. Remember his memory of being on top of a hill in snow? one of his first memories he ever received from the giver. He settled himself on the sled and hugged Gabriel close. The hill was steep, but the snow was powdery and soft, and he knew that this time there would be no ice, no fall, and no pain. Inside his freezing body, his heart surged with hope. He's feeling good. They started going down. Jonas felt himself losing consciousness, fainting, with his whole being willed himself to stay upright atop the sled, holding, clutching Gabriel, keeping himself. So he's starting to kind of almost fall asleep, but he must keep going. The runners sliced through the snow, and the wind whipped at his face as they sped in a straight line through an incision that seemed to lead to the final destination, the place that he had always felt was waiting, the elsewhere that held their future and their past. So it's this memory he remembers, in one of the earlier chapters when the giver is giving him his first memory of being on top of a hill with snow. That's where he is now. And he's going down the sled holding Gabriel through the cold snow and wind. He forced his eyes open as they went downward, sliding, and all at once he could see lights, and he recognized them now. He knew they were shining through the windows of rooms, that they were red, blue, and yellow lights that twinkled from trees in places where families created and kept memories, where they celebrated love, just like where he'd seen that family celebrating Christmas. Downward, faster and faster. Suddenly he was aware with certainty and joy that below, ahead, they were waiting for him, and that they were waiting too for the baby. For the first time, he heard something that he knew to be music. He heard people singing. Behind him, across vast distances of space and time, from the place, the community he had left, he thought he heard music too. But perhaps it was only an echo. Wow. So that's the end of the book, the end of chapter 23. The ending here, I'll explain in a minute, but basically he gets stuck in snow and he's pushing and pushing to try and keep him and Gabriel alive on the bike. Eventually it's too difficult. He puts Gabriel next to his chest and he's trying to find more memories he has of being warm so that they both don't freeze to death. He manages to find small memories as he's climbing up the hill that keeps him going, keeps him alive. Eventually, he makes it to the top of the hill, the same hill that he saw in the giver's memory that he gave him near the start of Jonas's training, when Jonas was at the top of a hill, when he first met snow, when he first saw what a hill was. And then as he's going down, he hears in the distance, or he sees the lights in a house of a family celebrating Christmas. Is it the same family that the giver showed him in a memory about love? Anyway, the ending is difficult. You make your own decision what you think is about to happen or is happening to Jonas. That's the end of the book. Congratulations.